Call the Planning Commission meeting to order, please. First order of business is the approval of minutes for the March 7th, 2024 meeting. A motion?
Move the minutes for the March 7th, 2024 meeting, the Planning Commission be approved as submitted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Now we're going to go to old business, amendment of the 2023 Planning Department Annual Report. Kevin?
All right. You'd approved the annual report 2 weeks ago. That then went to the town board for review and several. Thank you. Several changes were made to the development regulations section of the annual report that were incorrect. Those, what happened was, what was passed by you was modified by the town board, and that never got reflected in the record. So that has been changed based on feedback. That concerns mostly the removal of, or the exclusion of short-term rentals. Those are still, right now, they are still prohibited in town. They were originally proposed to be permitted, but with restrictions, but those are not contained in those are not amendments to the code. So that was changed. Several other smaller.
And we didn't approve those in the comprehensive plan.
In the comprehensive plan, yes, there were recommendations to do so,
But they're not in the development regs.
they're not in the development regulations right now. There's several other minor changes with regard to wording, and that was provided to you with a red line in your package. Also, earlier today, we got a markup of the annual report, and that markup mostly looks at the misspellings, grammar, things like that. There are a couple of things that are of concern to the person who made comments, and that is one is there is a reference to the police department and comments in the annual report regarding what the police department is legally, what the Planning Commission legally obligate the police department to do. And I think that was something that was not exactly it was not looked at in the context of the comprehensive plan. In Appendix B, all of the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan are listed. The Planning Commission has an obligation to provide the state with evidence of progress towards meeting those goals and objectives in the comprehensive plan. The wording in Appendix B is directly taken from the comp plan, and certainly the planning department will verify that, but that is directly from the comprehensive plan. There's no change in the wording. So, my opinion, either you remove it completely, but you can't be changing the text of the comprehensive plan as it relates to this report. So that's something that you can work through. If you decide that you want to have us do a little bit more research, we can come back next month. This is not due until July 1st. There's also several other changes that are being proposed in this markup that you received, and I'm sure you didn't have a chance to look at it. I just got it this morning.
There are grammar changes that do need to be made in your
Yes.
opinion?
Yes.
Well, that might be a pretty good idea. Hold off until the next meeting, and Kevin has a chance to.
That's fine.
Go over it.
We can look at that. We can make, We can verify that the wording in Appendix B is correct, but it is supposed to have been taken straight from the comp plan. And if it is, you can't change it. You as a board cannot change it. Or I would not advise it, put it that way.
The question then is the comprehensive plan incorrect?
No, I don't believe so. Comprehensive plan is directing, it was reviewed by all the departments in town.
No, I'm just saying, so it was more of a transition from the comprehensive plan to this.
Yeah, there might be a mistaken assumptions that that somehow you're directing the police department to do something. And I don't believe that's the case, unless you feel like you are. But this is a record of the comp plan, and whether or not the town of Bel Air is making progress to address all of the goals and objectives of the comp plan. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't even want to give the perception that there is any attempt to amend the comp plan. There is a process for that, and it is not this. So that's my 2 cents to support what Kevin said.
Okay. Do we need some sort of a motion here, Kevin, or are we just, this was
yeah,
a discussion?
if you could, take a motion to table this, actually continue this to the next meeting.
Okay. Before we go to the motion,
I move that we table.
I was going to ask for public comment. Is there any public comment regarding the annual report? There isn't. I'm sorry.
I move that we table the annual report for the purpose of cleaning up grammatic issues and to get a opinion from staff and council as far as the proposed amendments that are being made.
Second.
Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to review of a site plan, subdivision plan, special development, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that we tabled from our March 7th meeting, asking Kevin and Elizabeth to look at this more comprehensively, and they certainly did. It was just an outstanding job of pulling all this together. So unless there's any other discussion among the planning commission members, we can go to vote. Now, in terms of the voting, we have 5 motions. 5 motions will be made. The motions will be read in their entirety. So we can.
I'll take the first one.
You guys are going to share them?
All right, here we go.
And apologies, it's rather lengthy, but it needs to be read for the record as it's in front of us for the record. This is to do with the first one's easy. That I move that the project as approved is consistent with the 2022 Town of Bel Air Comprehensive Plan as required by Town Code Section 165-19.
Second.
Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, moving right along. Mixed-use development. At a minimum, the mixed-use development approval is based upon the following findings of fact: that the applicant has adequately demonstrated adherence to section 165-53I2G. Now, letter A. The applicant has provided a unified arrangement of buildings, service areas, parking, signage, and landscaping. B. The architecture, site design, lighting, and signage incorporate consistent design and theme elements and materials, massing, and facade design for the project that is in harmony with the character of the neighborhood. C. You don't have to type all this, okay.
We're not going to force you to do that.
C, The internal circulation system is designed to minimize through traffic and traffic conflicts within the project. D, safe pedestrian movement and the provision of pedestrian walks within the parking lot and surrounding the building perimeter is considered in the design. E, all proposed establishments have vehicular service access either from an individual service drive, space, or from a common service yard. All loading, trash removal, compaction, or similar activities are segregated from public areas and screened from public view as is practicable. F, signs to identify the use of an occupant will be designed as part of the architectural design of the building. Proposed signage is conditioned for the approval of the preliminary plan and is subject to review and approval by the Planning Commission. G, directional and informational signage will be adequately provided and design coordinated. H, center management is responsible for providing on-site security service. I, a traffic and parking study was submitted and approved by the town. J, the owners of all lots will execute a recorded development agreement with the town, providing that all owners acknowledge and agree to be bound by performance standards as an overall scheme of development, outlining all shared elements, granting reciprocal easements to permit each owner to access any other owner's lot or parcel of land for the purpose of compliance with the town code, and for either remediating any zoning violation or to comply with the town code for the purpose of any approval sought by any of the owners of the lot, and agreeing that the town shall permit enforcement of any portion of the town code upon one or more owners of any lot or parcel of land contained within the mixed-use center scheme of development, period.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Surely vote aye after reading all that.
Aye. Next motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve of the special development for an outdoor dining bar. Service use is based upon the following finding of facts: that the applicant has adequately demonstrated adherence to the performance standards as provided in section 165-53I2 little I. Amplified music or public addresses are not permitted between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. Live entertainment and recreational games are not permitted between 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. C, outdoor dining bars will adhere to the requirements of Chapter 345 of the Town Code. D, the exterior seating is limited to 81 seats, which meets the limit of 75% of the capacity of the principal permitted use. Any temporary enclosure must meet the provision of section 165-71.c. And E, the physical bar, or no physical bar for the service of alcohol is proposed. Alcohol consumption or service in the outdoor area must be approved by the Harford County Liquor Board.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to approve the site plan?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the site plan be approved at a minimum. Approval of the preliminary site plan is conditioned on the following. A, prior to the building application, submission of a final plat for signature incorporating comments from the staff report and comments from 1, the Bel Air Volunteer Fire Company dated February 25th, 2024 as amended. 2, Harford County Health Department dated February 16th, 2024. 3, Harford County Soil Conservation District dated February 20th, 2024. 4, Bel Air Public Works comments dated February 20th, 2024. 5, Harford County Public School dated February 28th, 2024. B, prior to the approval of utility construction drawings, the applicant must address comments from Maryland American Water Company. C, prior to the final or prior to signature of the final site plat, approval of the revised architectural design exhibits based on the town staff's comments and architectural consultant comments dated February 23rd, 2024. Architectural design of 130 North Bond Street must be approved by the Planning Commission prior to use and occupancy. D, prior to signature of the final site plat, submission and approval of a shared parking agreement for 16 spaces based on section 165-51.b, paren 5. E, waiver of a 3-foot landscape buffer required between the proposed parking and parcels 41 based on section 165-59.a, paren 3. F, approval of 60 stacked parking spaces as shown on the final site plan based on section 165-51.f, paren 1, paren little e. G, prior to use and occupancy, submission and approval by the town of design, development, plans, and details for the proposed active space improvement on parcel 491. H, prior to the issuance of the final use and occupancy permit, complete all site work on the final site plan. 2, construction of required off-site improvements outlined in the town traffic impact analysis conditional approval letter dated February 23rd, 2024. And finally, 3, installation of all landscape.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Just one point of order, in E, it's a lot to read. Don meant 491. He said 41, but he meant 491.
I'm sorry, did I say 491?
Yeah, that's all right. Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye. Motion to accept to approve the landscape plan?
I move the landscape plan, at a minimum, approval of the preliminary plan is conditioned on the following. A, prior to building permit issuance, submission of a final landscaping plan incorporating comments from the staff report and comments from submission of required forestation fee in lieu of as outlined in the Forest Conservation Plan approval letter. And 2, incorporation of changes based upon the revised landscape plan submitted on February 23rd, 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye. And last, motion to approve the subdivision plan.
Mr. Chairman, at a minimum, approval of the site preliminary subdivision plan is conditioned on the following. A, prior to building permit application, submission of a final subdivision plat for signature incorporating comments from the staff report and comments from Hartford County Health Department dated February 16th, 2024. 2, Bel Air Public Works comments dated February 20th, 2024. B, prior to the building permit issuance, recordation of the final subdivision plat along with any easements or any easement documents and any other required documents to be recorded amongst the land records of Hartford County. C, conveyance of the required Lester Way improvements right-of-way to the town of Bel Air prior to use and occupancy. D, submission of a development agreement to the town for approval and recordation as required in section 165-53.I, paren 2, paren little g, prior to building permit issuance. E, complete all of the conditions of the Town of Bel Air traffic impact analysis approval dated February 23rd, 2024, and all conditions of Maryland Department of Transportation SHA review regarding state road intersections and all conditions of Hartford County concerning county roads intersections prior to use and occupancy. F, the applicant must provide a copy of a recorded deed of consolidations consolidating 100 Lester Way, 120 North Bond Street, and 130
One-
North
128
Bond Street.
no,
Oh, I'm sorry, 128,
100 Leicester Way, 128.
Eight.
Right.
100 Lester Way, 128 North Bond Street, 130 North Bond Street, and removal of the boundary lines.
Second.
Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye.
One thing on the, all of these approvals, all the conditions are associated with this approval, there's an attachment to the approval letter that is, that sets forth all of the attached findings of fact and conclusions of law. So that is made part of the approval, and it's included with the approval letter.
Not required to be read or voted upon.
Oh, I hope
correct?
not, no.
Should we vote on it? Should we adopt this?
Adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law?
Now,
Where I'll defer to,
I mean, there's
Counsel.
nothing wrong with you guys, making a motion to, adopt it. I mean, I think it's kind of.
Move that we adopt the findings of fact.
Huh?
Move that we adopt the findings of fact
And conclusions of law.
and conclusions of law.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, Keith?
No.
Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Congratulations,
And
Mr.
recommend
Goddard.
you guys sign it now, so we can give it to them, so they have their decision all in one day.
I didn't think we worked that fast. I mean, we're good.
Taking us how many meetings to get there to work that fast?
Only two for this one. Not even close to our budget.
take that whole thing.
Just the top page, right? We don't have to date it. I don't have to date the signature. Okay? Okay. Next agenda item is, under new business, a review of ordinance 826-24, revising section 165-52 for fee in lieu of open space. Kev?
All right. All right, I'll give a very short summary, and then also defer to Commissioner Taylor if you'd like to say anything. This is a proposed amendment to the fee in lieu allowances for any residential development that comes into town. This, again, is, like you said, is found in 165-52. It removes the approval by the town board of fee in lieu for open space. And it also limits the zoning to just the B2 district as far as the what is eligible for fee in lieu for open space. It changes also the fee, how the fees will be determined, and matches the county's calculation. Right now, we have a fee schedule that is passed annually with small changes, and that it lists the open space as $50,000 an acre. What the county does is it takes the value of the land and then considers it at 110% of that value. So if you're looking for, if an acre is $500,000, it's 500,000 plus 10%. And that would be what would be required for fee in lieu. That's really all the changes, and I'll defer to Mr. Taylor.
Okay. Public comment?
For the record, Jake Taylor, Town Commissioner, 602 Mapleview Drive, Bel Air, Maryland. Vice Chair Schler, members of the Planning Commission, I want to thank you all for providing me with an opportunity to address the body this evening. I come to present Ordinance 82624, legislation I have sponsored with the goal of increasing open space in the town of Bel Air and better integrating new projects with the town. So Kevin outlined the three main provisions of the legislation, and as I see them, fundamentally they are, the Planning Commission had recommended a few meetings ago that the fee schedule be increased. The choice of this legislation is to comport it with the standard as set by Harford County. Next, the bill removes a clause that was deemed to be inoperative, that includes in the preamble a reference to approval by the Board of Town Commissioners, but then is never again mentioned again in the subsection for the process of the approval of fee in lieu. So it strikes that dangling section out. And most importantly, the legislation amends the area in which fee in lieu of open space is eligible to the B2 zoning district, where it's understood that the provision of open space is generally implausible. So the goal of the legislation is not to act as a punitive measure. Rather, I seek to end the practice of treating Bel Air's open space requirement as just a fee to be paid. Instead of viewing the open space requirement as simply something to be satisfied, I envision it as something to be embraced. Open space makes projects both more visually appealing and more integrated with the surrounding community. I applaud and encourage those projects that actively and enthusiastically seek to provide open space as a feature of their investment rather than as a concession. These are the investments that move Bel Air forward and thoughtfully respond to the needs and desires of the citizens who avail themselves of the amenities that they provide. And of course, it is important to note that for those projects for which the provision of open space does present a legitimate and unique hardship, there remains recourse with the Board of Appeals for an open space variance. Regardless of the zoning district, that remains the same. The state of Maryland and Harford County both recommend the provision of open space at a rate of 30 acres per 1,000 residents. With over 10,000 residents but only 189 acres of open space, the town of Bel Air falls well short of that goal at only 17.8 acres per 1,000 residents. These figures can be referenced in both the Harford County Land Preservation Report and the 2022 Bel Air Comp Plan, pages 51 and 98 respectively. And while I recognize that as a municipality, Bel Air is very unlikely to fully satisfy the state's goal, we are projected to, quite literally, lose ground in this arena by as much as 2 acres per 1,000 residents over the next 20 years. As an elected official who's heard from many residents concerned about the future of open, recreational, and green space in our town, I believe that now is the time to act to preserve this critical piece of our community's appeal. Each acre of open space that is paved over today is unlikely to be recovered for years, if ever. This makes preservation, even if that means saving acre by acre and square foot by square foot, more important now than ever before. So candidly, my goal with this legislation in practice is to decrease the number of applicants who appear before this board with a plan that has fee in lieu of open space built into the design and increase the number who embrace it. We need projects that from their inception take a posture of embracing open space. And while I remain firmly committed to that universal goal, I'm open-minded in the particular means by which we might achieve it, and I'm certainly looking forward to feedback and a productive conversation on how we can efficiently and effectively preserve open space for town residents while maintaining a healthy economic environment. I really see this as a realm in which the town, its residents, and community stakeholders can work collaboratively to build a greener, more prosperous Bel Air. Our town, as I'm sure you'd all agree, is the perfect place to take a stroll, for your kids to play, or just to breathe in some clean, fresh air, and that's something worth protecting. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your consideration and yield to any questions from the commissioners that they might have.
Ready for discussion, but I don't have any questions.
Sure.
You clearly thought a lot about it, and I commend you for that. And I think I'm supportive of getting our fees more in line with what Harford County is charging. I guess if I have any concern, it's about that we would have a more restrictive process than Harford County has as far as what zoning
Sure.
districts would apply. I'm not sure that that's in our best interest. That would be my concern. As far as the process and eliminating the town board, we've had up to now, if I understand the process correctly, an applicant asks for it, if we approve it, as part of the, plan, that then goes to the, town board. If the applicant doesn't like the action of the town board on that, it goes to the Board of Appeals. And then after that would be circuit court. So there's been a pretty good layering of process here, a lot of different eyes getting a look at it. I don't know if we're solving a problem that we don't have. And I do have a concern about us being on anything more restrictive than Harford County.
So.
One thing to,
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Please, Kevin.
One thing to note is that the town really has never followed that process of going to the town board after you have approved fee and lieu. So again, that's something that really hasn't happened often up until the last year. So we've had 2 submissions that have required that.
I would certainly defer to the town board if they wanted to eliminate themselves from the process, which is not a bad idea. It depoliticizes that, takes a little pressure off of elected officials, and you can blame the planning commission, you can blame the Board of Appeals, citizen volunteers that were appointed, and that might make sense. Kevin, could you share with us, or Commissioner Taylor, by the change in the zoning, limiting it to just the B2, what potential projects would this no longer be available to? Potential product, we have none right now, they're in the pipeline, right?
I think the one that stands out is there's a vacant field next to William Street behind
Spartan Floor.
Spartan Surfaces, yeah. That's the only one that really stands out to
That
me.
was the old O'Neill property.
Yeah.
For many years.
Part of it, anyway.
So my thought process is that, this is a process that has not been followed, that really only exists, if you look at the subtitle, only exists in one sentence and then is in the preamble, and then is never again referenced at all in terms of how that actually would be found. There's no standard of review that's given to the board. There's really no guidance whatsoever. So upon consultation with staff and council, we felt as though it would be right to shift entirely and make clear that the consideration of the merits of individual projects is certainly the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. And that's the goal of, making everything comport in that regard. I did want to briefly address your first concern about being more restrictive in Harford County. While that's true, I do think that there is a significant difference in terms of Harford County's relationship with open space and the town of Bel Air's relationship with open space. As a municipality, we might have to scrape and scratch a little bit more for our open space rather than, the great sprawl of the north that allows Harford County to meet a lot of requirements and guidelines. So I would sort of emphasize that for those projects for whom it does present a legitimate hardship, the Board of Appeals remains legal recourse. But I do want to encourage, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from submitting a project, but I want them to, as they're submitting, consider Bel Air is a place that values open space, and projects that come to Bel Air should, embrace that aspect of who we are as a town.
So help me then through this, and maybe council as well. We only can identify one potential property at this time. There could be more later. If they were not eligible for fee in lieu of, they could go to the Board of Appeals and get a variance to have it apply, or how would that work?
Right, if they have to prove certain criteria for a variance, which is uniqueness in the property and hardship. But,
Same way they would
could do
to
that.
us.
They would.
That's
If
correct.
it was us.
Yeah, so that was the alternative, and removing it was to say, okay, if they were outside the B2 and they could not, due to site constraints or particular, characteristics of the property, they could, and that created a hardship that they didn't create, they could get a variance. I mean, the standard is substantially higher than your open space criteria of impracticality that you have to find, like we did in the Hartford Mall. So,
Well, and to me, it makes sense that it should be in other than B2 areas. When we think about where have we used this and where would we visualize using this? Well, up on Main Street and maybe Churchville Road, where there's really not a lot of options, where the only property that you've identified that's in question, well, they've got an option there. That's grassy space right now. It's not paved and, you know, and as long as there's an outlet for them to go to the Board of Appeals and make their case there as opposed to making it to us, I wouldn't know of a reason to object.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be, I mean, in your general zoning legal background or general rules, you know, if someone has a unique set of circumstances that makes compliance with the code, you know, and it's not, I don't want to do that, it's a substantial hardship, they have to be able to seek relief from the board or an administrative capacity or something. So you can't just say, no, they can't go to the Board of Appeals, which is kind of what we had discussed before.
And to that point, I'm certainly not trying to jam anybody up. I just think, you know, for example, if someone, I don't want to speculate, but if we were to have a property that could include it, having spoken with the, you know, the residents of town that I've spoken to, I think that they'd like to see them do so when it is feasible and plausible. So there remains recourse, not trying to eliminate that, but trying to shift the conversation about, you know, where these things come in.
Are
So
we
how-
discussing, or are we
Yes, we're
still
discussing.
asking questions?
So how do we get past somebody that comes in and has an HOA type scenario? So it's more for their users than open space for the public.
Oh, the way we've treated open space in the past, it doesn't have to be for public use. Is that what you're asking?
Right.
Yeah, it can be private open space. Good example is overlook a gateway and whatever the other one is, Legacy at Gateway. All that space is theirs, and they don't like anybody getting on it.
Well,
So
no,
they're
they complain about people accessing the mile mile trail
right.
through their property, but yet,
Which sometimes is me.
but no, my point being is,
They've never complained to me, by the way.
from
I
an
don't-
open space
must not
standpoint, are we
Seem very threatening.
doing it from a general purpose, turn, like for anybody, open space, I mean, from a public aspect, or just open space for a project?
Nope, it doesn't make, we have in the past never made distinctions whether it's for public use or for just the development's use.
And if that's, you know, something that you'd like to work on, I'd be happy to have that conversation, but
Well, again, it's public versus private type scenario, I'm just
Right.
throwing it out because
absolutely.
I took from your comments that with people in the town of Bel Air wanting more open space, but if you have somebody that has private property, they may be open space, but may not be entitled to it.
Absolutely. And so there's both an active recreational component of open space, but then there's also a visual environmental component. And so private open space may not satisfy the active recreational component for all of the community, but it may satisfy the visual environmental component. But again, you know, if we wanted to work on, that's not this legislation, but if we wanted to in the future take a look at that, about distinctions and saying, well, you know, you've got to have at least some that is publicly available, it's certainly a conversation I'd be open to.
Wouldn't that apply on what we just approved, Mr. Goddard's site with the,
Yes.
where the picnic tables are? That would be a private, probably not too terribly much enforced, but probably that's a private park. It's on private property. It's
I-
open space.
Yeah, but I mean, we would have to determine, I think his intention is to make it a publicly accessible
But he
park.
wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
It wasn't a condition.
He
of
would
his
not
approval.
have to do that, no.
So the money that has been realized in the past from the fee in lieu, for instance, the apartments at Hartford Mall, that's a substantial figure. And while somebody may have open space that, you know, is private, but they can't comply to the whole thing, and they want to, you know, fee in lieu of, and that goes toward our parks, you know, improvements. So we don't have that anymore. We don't have that.
No.
No.
And over the past, I mean, Kevin, you may have this more readily available. It has been quite some time that we've gotten a substantial figure.
Yes, yeah, this is a outlier,
Yeah.
what's happened in the last
And
year.
even then, remind me what the figure from that project was?
176,000?
Yeah.
So we have 176.5 granted to the Hartford Mall and 14,000 to Hickory Flats. That's what's outstanding right now.
Now, if Hartford Mall, let's say if years down the road, there were further changes over there and further apartments requested and a fee in lieu of requested, they would be eligible or ineligible
For where?
at Hartford Mall, if there were
Oh,
additional.
If Hartford Mall, and you can, if you want to talk about the carve-out, for the, basically, in the legislation, there is a
Yes.
codicil that basically says that any
Good point.
project that has already obtained approval for fee in lieu for open space would not be affected by this legislation.
Right, so I'm not
That's
applying this
obvious.
retroactively, that's
Right.
right.
But if there were further.
If they did more work,
Would they
and
be
they,
eligible for fee in lieu of, and would it apply at the new higher rate?
the fee in lieu that they're providing is for the entire site.
Right.
So they
Oh,
don't have
okay.
to provide any
It
more.
would be done, okay.
There's some potential recommendations, options that were provided here to give this a little more flexibility. Did you look those over, and did you consider any of those, Jake?
Yes, so let me look through these. So this first one here, expand the allowance of 110% assessed area of raw land as the standard for fee and lieu calculation by allowing off-site open space. I believe there's going to be more work done on individual development rights agreements that may allow,
I'm sorry, are you referring to DRRAs?
I am, yes.
Oh, okay, development, yeah, rights and responsibilities agreements. Oh, sorry. I was
Yes,
like, wait, what?
correct. I'm shortening it, but yes.
Yeah.
So DRRA, so the idea there being that moving forward, the town may be interested in pursuing sort of one-off agreements that we say, okay, there's a hardship here, there's a need here, let's connect those dots and allow for that. So I don't think that that's necessarily this legislation, only because that's part of a much broader conversation about the town's ability to do that and what the standards are there. However, that's certainly something that I think could come into play later. Kevin, if you wouldn't mind explaining what's meant by number 2?
Allowing phased implementation of open space probably is something that is, and what it would be is, like, say somebody is required, well, I'm going to give the Hartford Mall as a good example. Hartford Mall had a certain obligation. It was in the neighborhood of about 5 acres of open space. That obligation could have been phased in, where they provide 2 acres now, and then they provide a bond that maybe lasts for 5 years, and that would then be provided at some point in the future. And if they don't reach that, then they have to provide the fee in lieu for it. That's kind of the simplified version of phasing the open space. One of the projects that did use that was the Gateway, Overlook at Gateway and Legacy at Gateway. They started their process, and 2008 hit. And everything died, basically. All the projects basically stopped. But they didn't have all of their open space done at that point. So they were obligated, and there was a memo that I had to follow from my predecessor that said, you have to provide X, Y, and Z, and that's what they followed to complete their development.
Yeah, so I don't think that, I appreciate that explanation, and I'm with you now. I don't think that that necessarily addresses the concerns that I'm seeking to resolve with this legislation. But as I'm continuing looking here, I'm looking at number 4. Number 4 is an issue that I would have to study more closely in terms of the impact, but is intriguing to me, and I think might be something that, you know, if we're looking at how do we make the open space requirement more easily accessible and more easily satisfiable so that folks don't need to, you know, ever go to the Board of Appeals, I would be interested in looking at this. Again, that's not this legislation, but could be part of a, you know, future reworking of how we treat open space in the town of Bel Air.
One of the, and I'll give you a little bit of background
Go
on
ahead.
number 4. I was getting people coming in when I first got here who wanted to take landscape islands in the middle of a parking lot and apply them to their open space. And it was just, in my opinion, not meeting the intent of the ordinance. And so we made the open space something where you really, if you did do it, it was something substantial. So that was, like I said, the background for providing those minimums.
Yeah, and so I think that that's something that certainly, I don't want to go back to this idea of including, you know, landscape islands, but I do think that maybe there can be some study done in terms of, well, if you've got 2 pieces of land that might be non-contiguous but are within a certain proximity of each other, can that be counted as contiguous? I'm just spitballing here. But that might be something that we can look at in terms of, so not necessarily the one-off landscape island, but things that don't quite meet the definition that could be relaxed. I'd be open to considering that.
I think a good example of that is that affected the mall was the perimeter around their parking lot. That perimeter provides for some buffering of the parking lot. In fact, our landscape requirements require that, but they never got much credit for it because it didn't meet the 6-foot width.
Right.
Or, no, I'm sorry, the 10-foot width.
So that certainly is something that I think is due some consideration.
And just to clarify something, because this hasn't come up before you guys yet, and it is something that is in the works right now with Commissioner Rutledge and to some extent Commissioner Taylor. The commissioners are investigating the use of DRRAs, which stands for Development Rights and Responsibilities Agreements. And just to clarify something, it's under the land use article. So basically what it does is it provides vesting to the developer in exchange for an exaction. So vesting under Maryland law occurs based on judicial case law when they've received the building permit and they've started substantial construction. And of course, that's very ambiguous, right? What does that mean? Digging a hole, dropping a footer? That's kind of generally. But what it does is it says, okay, we'll give you vesting now, right now, and in exchange, we'll give an exaction. Some of the examples that we've reviewed, City of Rockville, and a couple others, I think Laurel was one of them too, has open space as one of those exactions. And what they do is they say, okay, the code requires X amount of open space, and you are going to provide more open space either on your project or off-site. So under Maryland law, the town cannot provide or require a developer to fix something or provide something that is off the site, the subject of the property. But if we agree in writing, we can do whatever we want. So that was sort of the idea. I think you were trying to allude to, like, you know, this is part and parcel of what we're trying to do, but this is something that hasn't come before you yet, and it is permitted under Maryland law, under the land use article. And Kevin and I have encouraged it a lot because you can do a lot of really interesting things with it, but that will come. But that was the piece I just wanted to clarify with the open space, because Kevin made the comment in his need to agree in writing with conditions of this type of in-kind provision, and that's correct. That's where that comes from, is the DRRAs.
So the open space could, if we go along this process and we agree to this in the future, while somebody could develop here, the open space may not benefit the town of Bel Air, but someplace out in the county.
No, it would have to be in the town of Bel Air. It would absolutely have to benefit the residents of the town of Bel Air. So by way of example, one thing that we kind of talked about was like, okay, you know, what developers, you know, are doing stuff. We got Homestead Park, needs some renovations to it. It's going to cost $80,000 roughly estimated. Well, okay, developer, you're on one side of the town and Homestead's on the other side of the town. We'll give you a DRRA. You're vested now. You pay the $80,000 and fix our park. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So those are ways of exacting, kind of like what you were saying, Phil, like, okay, this money's going to be gone. How are we going to replace these funds that we can use to fix parks? Or maybe you said it, Pete. That is a way that you can do that easily, and it's legal.
And I do think that, you know, it's best understood as you might have a project that has some, you know, some need, but the town at the same time over here has an emergency need or an urgent, immediate need. And those two parties can agree in writing amicably to work it out with each other. And that's done on a case-by-case basis, only when the apparent need emerges.
There's no need on the part of the developer.
Well, that's true.
There's none.
That's a good point.
They have to meet the requirements of the code. If this is passed.
Yes.
And they're outside of B2, there is no fee in lieu. They must provide the required open space. Now, what we can do is to say, okay, well, you're required, I don't know, 2 acres, whatever, pick a number. So you're going to require 3,
Yeah.
or you're going to fix my park, or you're going to build me a new park. You can do that. But
Right.
there's no need on the part of the developer. They must comply with the code.
No, I appreciate that clarification. I misspeaking to say the need is on the part of the town, so to Commissioner Coates's question, it will always be on the other end of that, a need that the town has, not somewhere else.
So Jake, without going back into your notes, being philosophical, what is your main objective to what we have now?
I'm sorry?
What is your main objection to what we have now?
Yeah, so my main objection is when, you know, and I think that this has happened before, you have projects that come before the Planning Commission that essentially from their inception are relying on the provision of open space. And that from the moment that that project was planned, they're assuming or they're relying on this idea that they're not going to have to meet the requirement. And so instead of making a project that embraces the requirement, and the reason, in my opinion, that we have a requirement is because open space is good, it's a positive thing, the people of town support it. So instead of coming to this board with a project that includes open space, embraces open space, they come with a project that, you know, maybe they're willing to haggle. Are we going to fulfill 50%? Are we going to fulfill 70%? And I would like to change essentially the posture of discussion that takes place with the Planning Commission to, you know, certainly, again, I emphasize that if there is a genuine hardship, that the Board of Appeals remains recourse. But for those that can provide it in their project, they ought to. And that's the objection, and that's the solution.
One of the things to do, just to kind of add on to that, it does make the process simpler for the planning department because we're not having to negotiate something where they expect going into the planning commission that they're going to get a fee in lieu when that may not be the case. You may look at that and say there's no impracticability, and then they feel like they've been led down the primrose path, and then that's one positive aspect to say, look, you got to provide it, or your project's not going to get approved.
I would,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just very briefly, I would be remiss not to clarify and mention that there have also been many projects that come before this board that do a wonderful job providing open space, some that provide more than 100% of the open space requirement. I'd like to see more of that. I think those projects bring a lot of value to town. So I felt as though that was an important thing to mention, that there are certainly projects that do this very well, and I'd like to see more of those.
And then back to Kevin's point that not only have the developers assumed that they'll get fee in lieu of, but they've been getting a very inexpensive fee in lieu of.
Yes.
And that's addressed in this proposal.
Kevin, in that regard, is there any magic to the 110% that's
It-
proposed?
The magic is it matches the county.
But that's not the maximum that we could ask for.
Well, if it goes into the code like that, that would be what's
Right,
provided.
I'm
But you're
saying
right, you
that-
could recommend that it go higher.
All right, here's my thought processes on the whole thing. First, I don't have any problem with the deletion of the sentence in the preamble if that's not the way it's working, practically speaking. And I certainly don't have any problem with adjusting the fee based upon a different formula. What I do have is, my understanding of this is that it is entirely optional on the planning commission as to whether we accept a fee in lieu. We don't have to accept it, even if they come in and say,
Correct.
gee, we want to squeeze in 5 more units or whatever. And
It is
because of
entirely
that-
optional.
So we say, no, we want the open space. However, I think the practical solution to that is to increase the cost of the fee in lieu, rather than doing away with providing it as an option in all of the zoning districts. If you increase the cost to the point where it's no longer economically beneficial to the developer to say, oh, you know what, we'll put in the fee in lieu because, or we'll put in the open space because to do it your way, we're gonna have to pay 300% of what the land would be worth, and that's just not economic.
And that is, I think, to Commissioner Taylor's point, is that in the county, they don't have too many times where fee in lieu is asked for
So you got
for
the
two
land.
reasons. One is that there's, the land values out in the county aren't what they are here in town, but also the cost is so much higher that they decide to figure out a way to make it work.
No, and that's, I think rather than restrict, this is just a tool in our arsenal. So rather than restrict where this can be used, we make it so that if you want to use it, we'll consider it, but it's going to cost you. And the cost then becomes a benefit to the town that it can be used for existing open space that we control, rather than open space that a developer might put in that would only be available for that development.
Right.
I just think the restriction to the B2 zoning is wrong.
Do you, the map that was provided at the back of your handout,
I saw that.
if it was expanded to that map, would that be something that,
Again, why restrict ourselves? If it's optional that we approve it, not optional that the developer use it, they can't cram it down our throats. As long as it's our decision whether to allow it or not, why restrict it to any area?
do you think the criteria associated of impracticability, if I pronounced that right, is that adequate?
I think that if you increase the cost of the fee in lieu,
It won't matter at that
it
point.
won't matter, because the developer will have to take that into account himself.
Okay.
Can't argue that. I mean,
Oh, no,
let's face it, that's what people make business decisions about all the time. How
I-
much is it gonna cost me?
I think one of the things, like in the B2, where we're talking, is that the amount of open space is going to be pretty small. It's not going to be a lot, so that the ability to provide that in a fee would be a little easier than it would be, say, you know, in the B3, where you have large land parcels that you would have to account for.
But short of redeveloping something, like, you know, let's just say somebody decided to get a wild hair, and he went into Homestead Village and offered everybody $1 million for their houses. And for 400 homes, because they're gonna tear it down, because they can make $2 million off of that. I mean, those are the type of business decisions. I mean, from a land mass standpoint in the town of Bel Air, there are no huge parcels left.
No.
Unless we annex something.
Or unless
something
somebody comes
different.
along and cobbles together 7 or 8 parcels
Right.
that, yeah.
That's my point. So, I mean, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, you get 500 square feet of open space, that may be nice, but that just doesn't seem like it's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking tenth of an acre.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I kind of inclined to go along with Keith's idea of, you know, if it's 110% in the county because they have bigger parcels and bigger dollars, you know, if we went 200% or 250, I don't know that would get you the same thing in town with smaller pieces of property.
Well, I think you want to, and I'm probably speaking for Commissioner Taylor here, but I don't think you want to shut down potential development from coming into, say, the B2
Mhm.
zone. And what I'm thinking about is the old tire lot.
Yeah.
That old tire, that will come in and that will have a substantial amount of, a substantial obligation for open space.
That's B2.
That's
So
B2.
this proposal wouldn't affect that site at all, then?
It wouldn't, but they would have to provide fee in lieu at the percentage of 110, if, you know, using this ordinance.
And certainly if we were to go higher, which I'm following this train of thought, and I think that it's profitable, but Kevin raises a good point that if we were to continue up with that, that could very quickly become costly in a way that I'm not comfortable with for B2 development.
Well, and I think one of the things that we also have a requirement for, and this does affect the B2, and may be something that we need to consider moving forward, is once you go over 10 acres per, or 10 units per acre, an additional obligation kicks in of 200 square feet per unit of open space. And it was done specifically with B2 and the downtown in mind, because there's parcels are so small that you can build, you know, you can put a lot of density in one small area. But they're only having to provide open space for 15% of that area, and that might be that 500 square feet you're talking about. So it is something
So
where,
in that instance, you're looking for 2,000 square feet, not 500 square.
or
Or more.
more, much more probably.
I've got to say, you know, rather than see some development have a courtyard or some sort of atrium that is only available to those residents, I'd rather get the fee in lieu that can be used to repair, replace equipment on town parks that's available for everyone. I don't see fee in lieu as being evil. I see it as being something that we can use when we want to use it. And if in the past we've been too ready to allow developers to simply pay their way out of a problem, well, let's stop that practice. Let's jack up the fee and tell them, you know, you're going to have to put some open space in there if we feel that the project needs it.
Can we do something in B3 and something in Keith's suggestion about higher fees in other areas other than B2 outside, like the B3? Can we have different?
Different multipliers for different zones, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Sure. I never thought about that, but that's, well, like if you tried to do 110 for Homestead, or not Homestead, for Hartford Mall, that would be, it would be a lot of money. Yeah.
Can I ask the commission, because I'm following this and I think that a separate multiplier by zone is smart. However, my, concern remains that we might still have individuals who'd say, you know what, I'm going to pay what I'm going to pay. So I would wonder if the commission, if we were to go this route of, okay, let's open it back up, but jack up the fee, could we put a cap on the amount of the fee, of the open space requirement that is eligible to be paid?
Yes, you could.
And so that might prevent people from saying, I'm willing to, pay for 50% of my.
Again, what's the point? Why limit us? The developer can propose something, but we don't have to accept it. Just because the developer says, I'd like to pay my way out of this problem, we don't have to go along with it and say, okay, unless it makes sense to us. So I just don't get the point of putting a restriction on what we can accept, the flexibility that we can approach the problem with. Just does not make sense to me. It's optional.
What is our responsibility here, Kevin?
You would need to make a recommendation to the town board based on what you see in the proposed legislation, what changes you would want to make, or whether you want to make any changes. And then they would take that into I would write a report, and it would be handed to the town board when they consider the ordinance when it's introduced.
Is there a rush on this?
I'll defer to Mr.
You know, I certainly would like to begin the legislative process on this as soon as is feasible, but if the board is requesting some time to consider it.
I mean, if we had until the next meeting, Kevin, to get some things together, and, I mean, we've talked about bits and pieces here, but
Sure.
Are we not in agreement, though, on all of it, except for the piece about what zoning district it applies to?
Well, I mean, I think Keith brings up a valid point from the standpoint that if a fee in lieu situation happens, that they go to the Board of Appeals, and then all of a sudden, we have no say in it, because the Board of Appeals either said yay or nay. And something basically, if we look at it, then it gets, we either accept it as it is, and if they can do it, I mean,
Could they do that now?
well, no, we could say, I mean, based on what Keith's saying is, if we don't like it, we could say, you need open space.
Well, and their option would be to go to the Board of Appeals and try to obtain a variance, or,
But they could
they're
do
done,
that
or
now
appeal
and-
to court from your decision.
They
I
could do
guess.
that now.
They could do
That's
that under
correct.
the current rules.
Yes, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Nothing different there.
Well, no, I mean, so I guess my question is, who gets the first shot at us? Normally, it's the Planning Commission. Now-
Yes, you're the first step.
Now it would be the Board of Appeals. And again, not necessarily concerned one way or the other
Only,
who
under-
has the first shot at it. I'm just saying that, if from a planning standpoint, based on what Keith is saying, is that it would be up to us to say, we want the open space.
Right.
But if you eliminated the proposal of limiting it to just the R2, the B2, R2s will be next.
Oh, boy, don't say that.
Then all of it would still start with us. In other words, you got a couple of pieces to the recommendation here. One is the process of who does the approval. The second is increasing the fees, which to me is the most enticing
Mhm.
part of it. And then the third is restricting it to the just to the B2. And if it's our opinion collectively that we don't want to just restrict it to the B2, why wouldn't we support the rest of it and then give that recommendation back to the town board, and then they take it under advisement and do whatever they need to do? And then we're done with it then this month.
Can't argue with that.
One of the things that we could look at internally in the departmental is, I can see a need in certain zones to make sure that open space is provided on the lots. And I can see in certain zones that not all of the open space has to be provided on the lots, but maybe 50% can be fee in lieu. And then in some place like the B2, all of it could be fee in lieu. I think there's a review we could make to the board, and they don't have to take it. They can toss it aside if you like. But it's, because I look at zones like B3A. That is one that is kind of right on the periphery of downtown. And if there's an ability for them to at least get some relief, but still have to provide open space, there might be a an attraction with that. If that's something that could fly, I'm just suggesting it. Because I know what you're talking about, and, does that make sense or
No, and
not?
I'm thinking I'm agreeing with Keith that many situations, we'd rather have the money. Just take, Mr. Goddard didn't need the fee in lieu of for this project that we just did, but if he had needed it, we probably would say, well, we'd rather have the
Mhm.
money than have that little park where the picnic tables are.
Right.
Out of the two, right? Wouldn't we?
Right.
So you're in agreement that to eliminate the town board from the process, you're in agreement that 110% is appropriate for the multiplier?
I'm in agreement that maybe we start there, but we analyze that part of it and see whether we need to bump that higher.
You can provide that, you can table it and consider it the next month, or you can instruct the town board to consider that multiplier. Not instruct,
If I were
recommend.
making a motion, I would move that the amendment to the preamble be approved. The sentence, fee shall be determined at a rate of 110%, blah, 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 that be approved, but the limitation to the B2 zoning district not be approved.
And how about the elimination of the town board approval?
Yeah, that's
Yep.
the amendment to
That's,
the
okay, that's the
preamble.
preamble. I'll second that emotion, that motion.
Emotion, that emotion?
Okay, is there any further
Temptation
discussion?
song. Wasn't it?
There's lots of songs about that.
Call for the vote. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye.
There you go.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Commissioner Taylor. Well presented.
Yes.
All right, we got through one.
It took us a half an hour.
This next one should be relatively simple, but I've just jinxed it. You received some comments from, this is a change to the appeal process from the Historic Preservation Commission. Right now, the town board, not town board, any appeal from Historic Preservation Commission goes to the Board of Appeals. That does not necessarily agree with state law. State laws instructs that any appeal from the Historic Preservation Commission for any municipality or county be done in the same manner as it would be done from the Planning Commission. And then, of course, there is several reviser's notes in that same law, or at least not in the law, but adjacent to it. And so it made it somewhat ambiguous, and the town never changed their appeal process. It's always been to the Board of Appeals. As far as planning department goes, we don't have a problem taking it to the circuit court. It's no appeals, as long as I've been here, no appeal's been made from the Historic Preservation Commission. And for the most part, those appeals, whenever there's been roadblocks or questions or issues, those have been worked through by the HPC. And so there's, again, never been an appeal. And they've had some issues, like when, what was the old Aegis building had a mural painted on it. And they went back and forth with the developer and finally came up to a compromise. And of course, it's been painted several times since then.
Yeah, every time it changes hands.
And which is the part that, was really kind of, that's why you ended up with the flag on the side of the building, so that, and we've told every person every new establishment, you can't change that flag, because that was there to make a generic statement, an artistic statement. So anyway, It is relatively simple. It does change several sections of the code to make sure that everything goes to circuit court. Elizabeth can elaborate on some issues regarding the expense, because it does make the process more expensive. But it is relatively straightforward in the state code.
Yeah, so right now, the appeal to the Board of Appeals, the process is very simplistic. The appellant files an application with the Department of Planning and Community Development to go before the Board of Appeals. The filing fee is $300. The matter is generally scheduled within a month, and if the appellant is unsuccessful, it can file a petition for judicial review pursuant to Maryland Rule 7201 and take the matter to the circuit court. With this change, legally, a petition for judicial review falls under the Maryland Rule 7201. So the first thing that I pointed out is the town has to have all of the historic preservation meetings where any kind of consideration is done. There must be an audio recording of it, and those must be maintained for at least 30 days. In order to appeal a decision of an administrative agency under the Maryland rules to the circuit court, the appellant must file a petition for judicial review within 30 days of the HPC's decision. The filing fee is $165 here in Harford County. The appellant may also add additional causes of actions to a petition for judicial review, such as a complaint for declaratory judgment or a request for writ of administrative mandamus. The custodian of HPC, the man over there, has to transmit the record to the circuit court within 60 days of the receipt of the petition. Kevin is the custodian for you, the Board of Appeals, and HPC. They are responsible to pay the cost of the transcripts, the appellant is. That can be hundreds into $1,000. That's why we need the audio recording, and it has to be maintained for 30 days because you have to have a transcriptionist, court reporter, transcribe the record. And once the clerk receives HPC's record, the clerk notifies the parties of its receipt. The town must file a response to the petition within 30 days of the transmission of the record to the circuit court. That's me. Now you got a lawyer's fees involved. Appellant's brief is due in 30 days. They have to file a brief with the circuit court. HPC's brief is due another 30 days after that. That's, again, I have to get involved. Attorney's fees is involved. They have a reply brief. Oral argument is usually scheduled and then held before a circuit court judge. There is no time limit. It could be months before a hearing is heard. And the circuit court will render generally they do a written decision. Sometimes they do have, in the past, very oddly, issued their opinion from the bench. And if they do decide to do a written opinion, it can be months. There is no time limit. So just to give you, Keith probably knows about this. You don't need litigation. Oh, come on, you love it. It's great. It's like Sopranos or something. So that's just the general process. There is a very good argument that the land use article was amended. The problem is that some of the comments indicate otherwise. And there's an outstanding Attorney General's opinion that indicated that it potentially could still go to the Board of Appeals. It's not very clear. And the appellate court has never really chimed in on this. But the concern is from the commissioners, and I can understand and respect this concern, is that if we're wrong, okay, and they're going to the Board of Appeals, and we find out later on that they're wrong, they've lost their appellate right. If you don't file that appeal with the circuit court within 30 days, you're done. You can't get any relief. So there is no, oh, sorry, we got it wrong, we'll let it go through. The court won't hear it. It divests the court of jurisdiction if we're wrong. So the easiest, well, I shouldn't say easiest, the clearest avenue is to allow for the change to make sure that it's consistent with the land use article. I have voiced my concerns as to what I just told you with the commissioners, and this is the process for, A, and here's B. And it is going to be expensive for these people but unfortunately a necessary evil. If you had any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
What sort of issues would cause this to happen?
What would cause this to happen? To me, what I could see is just a straight up denial. Like, no, we're not going to agree to this. Or when they file for their tax credit, the HPC saying no. Because
So basically, somebody comes in and they want their house or their property or structure or whatever deemed historical. The Historical Society says
no.
no.
Yeah.
Historic
So
Commission.
the-
not-
Or commission.
Commission.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Get them
So,
into it.
so from there, they would ordinarily go to the Board of Appeals, but now they'd have to go to court.
Correct.
Right.
I don't know that that's necessarily bad.
No, and remember that if somebody comes in and wants to designate their property as historic, that is something that follows the normal process, and it goes to circuit court, because the ultimate decision remains with the town board. So, because that's designating the property. But once it's designated and somebody wants to change, I don't know, add a porch or something, that is now up to the HPC to decide whether that's appropriate. And typically, they kind of nibble around the edges. They say, you know, hey, we like the windows, but they really can't be vinyl. They need to be wood. Or in the case of a recent approval, the front door of the old 20 North Main building was changed from wood, and they wanted to make it steel. Well, they wanted to still have the same image of kind of recessed, what you call those? Panels, yeah, recessed panels that would look like the old door. And they've kind of been going back and forth with the folks at 20 North Main, and it's been working out. They're figuring out a way that everybody's happy. And that's the normal process it goes. I don't see this as being something that's going to pop up anytime soon.
Yeah, what'd you say, like 13 years and you've never seen it happen?
It's never, since
Yeah.
I've been in my position, we've never been appealed. And we've had some knockdown dragouts, but it's been, they figured out a way to compromise.
So that literally the process in circuit court would follow the process if someone wanted to appeal your decision here. Like, that's exactly the same process.
Which is
Um,
the intent of the state
Yeah,
law.
correct. Because it says, the planning commission, it literally says appeals shall be filed pursuant to the appeal structure that's followed by the planning commission in the local jurisdiction. So,
Counsel, what's your recommendation? As I sort through this, my first thought was, well, what are we even involved with this? But it's a development, right? I
Yes.
had that question answered. Doesn't affect us directly, but from a standpoint of protecting the town legally at the least expense possible, is the current legislation the most appropriate or the proposed legislation?
I think that, in my professional opinion, the proposed legislation is consistent with Maryland law. I'm not going to, unfortunately, say that it is going to be not onerous to property owners. As I said to the commissioners, with all due respect, my job is to protect the interests of the town of Bel Air, not the residents who want to sue the town or appeal a decision of yours or the HPC. So they would need to follow the strict rules of the Maryland rules in order to get relief through the circuit court. So I kind of like the Board of Appeals from that perspective, but I think there is too much of a risk in something coming up that says, okay, they should have filed it. And you have to understand, when I say it's detrimental to an appeal, so let's say we don't change it, and they go to the Board of Appeals, and they get to circuit court, and the judge finds a case, or the law clerk finds a case, it says, or the Attorney General's opinion, it says, oh, no, it has to have been filed within 30 days at the circuit court level, and they agree with that, that person's case is over with. Because what happens is the court no longer has jurisdiction to hear it. It's like blowing a timeline. If you blow a timeline, the court says, I can't help you. You didn't file it within 30 days.
Wouldn't that be true of judgments that we would make here, this panel too?
Yeah.
There'd be a time limit there as
Correct.
well.
Yeah, but the distinction is if we don't change this, as I understand this, correct me where I'm wrong, if we don't change this and let's say the Historic Preservation Committee rules one way and the homeowner or property owner says, I disagree with that, I'm going to the Board of Appeals to appeal that decision, and more than 30 days passes, if the Board of Appeals rules against the homeowner, they've just lost the ability to go to the circuit court, because the circuit court jurisdiction ends after 30 days.
Correct.
So what Liz is saying is the way to protect the homeowner is actually to take away the right to go to the Board of Appeals and therefore force them to go to the circuit court, which may ultimately take longer and cost more, but it's the only way that they'll have a final judgment.
So we would, in that context, we should be supporting the proposed
Correct.
legislation.
That's my opinion, yes. In full disclosure, because I think it's important for boards to understand the impact. And the same cheat sheet I just gave out I gave to the commissioners, because I think it's important for people to understand, in a vacuum, it's easy to say that, Board of Appeals, no, we're not going to do that, and we're going to send you to circuit court. But when you look at the practical aspects of it, that's what it is. So, but it does protect the homeowner in that regard, absolutely.
It's a good explanation, and in that context, I'd be ready to support the recommendation.
So how do we do this? A motion?
Same
or-
thing, yeah.
Do we need to assign ordinance numbers to these?
We
Uh,
have 165.
There-
and
It's a little
they're
early
both
in the
same.
process as far as ordinance numbers, because it hasn't been introduced yet.
But
Okay,
they have two different.
so what are we doing then?
You're,
Giving them a warm fuzzy feeling about it, or?
no, you would either support the proposed amendments or not.
So really the motion would be, we support amendment, chapter 246, and then amendment chapter 165.
Yeah.
Is that
Somewhat informal, because it's all recommendation.
Yeah.
Right. But I would recommend that we support amendment chapter 264, or 246, right? Yeah, 246, and amend chapter code 165.
I second.
Okay. Keith?
Aye.
Don?
Aye.
Phil?
Aye.
Aye.
And someone should bring the historic district folks down gently. They raised what seemed to be a legitimate point. Well, what problem are we solving? Well,
Right.
we're looking at a potential problem that,
I have to say, I wasn't there. I wasn't there.
so.
Yeah, Commissioner
I
Rutledge
can
can talk about that, because he was
I
there.
can understand why they might feel that way, and so.
Well, a lot of times, I mean, they're looking at this and trying to get an understanding of what is the appropriate course, and not having, Liz's opinion there is probably something that
Yeah.
they were missing. Yeah.
Okay. Kevin, project review, status report?
Sure, we've been going back and forth with Raising Cane's. They look like they're finally getting close to a final plan. Two things that were holding them up, one was stormwater management, because they had to get stormwater approved. And the second was their trash enclosure, thank you, is located in the floodplain. And it has to be, and it's fine to be in the floodplain, it's an accessory structure. They just have to make sure that it was too big to be in the floodplain without getting a variance from the Board of Appeals. So they had to adjust the size of that, so it got below that, the size that sent it to the Board of Appeals. And which they did. And so they're heading down that road. I would say within a month, they're gonna submit a final plan and start the process to get building permit approval. Chick-fil-A, for some reason, has not sent me a final plan, and I'm probably gonna have to reach out to them because that was relatively a straightforward review of their drive-through. So that's something that I'm surprised I don't have already. The mall is still working through a lot of legal challenges that they have to address, and it has nothing really to do with your basic approval or your conditions. It's there are certain development agreements that have to be executed, and there are certain requirements that they have to adhere to. One is which is taking care of all their utilities. So that's and their improvements on Bolton are somewhat extensive, and they affect the improvements that have been bonded for Gateway and Bolton, the intersection of Gateway and Bolton. You required the shops at Hartford Mall, where the grocery store was going, to be improved. That improvement hasn't taken place, but they've bonded the improvements. Now this is coming in, and these two have to mesh together. And so that's what they're going through right now. So the Hartford Mall is going through that process. Standard on Bond, well, you know, they're just got their approval, so there'll be a little while.
About Z-Vault, anything more?
Z-Vault decided not to come back.
Okay.
They had enough of you. One of our issues is that we're being a little bit more strict in what gets submitted, and the plans just were not.
It wasn't a good
Adequate.
submission. I guess there's nothing we can do to get that Jersey barrier out of there, or is
Actually, they are in violation because the Jersey barriers are temporary fences, basically, and they have to get permission from the Department of Public Works to keep them, and if they don't, they're gonna have to substitute something else in.
Just
So
looks-
we're
it
in the
looks
process
awful.
of sending them a letter.
This looks awful to me.
It does, and
It
I,
should to them.
yeah. One of the things that we were holding off on sending them a letter on violation was because they were going through the process to correct that issue. Since they've decided not to do that, then we're gonna have to send them the letter. I'm trying to think of any others that are on the list.
What's happening with the grocery store that isn't?
I have no idea. This was a corporate decision to stop all development for Amazon because I think that their brand, what they were doing just wasn't making money. I couldn't tell you exactly why it wasn't, but they stopped all of the developments.
Nationally.
Yeah. So I don't know. I assume that they are on the hook. I would bet the guy's already built the building. So they probably are paying on it, I would
It's
assume.
just, it would seem like a lot of money to us, but peanuts to them.
Oh,
And
he makes a
less
lot of
than-
money every day.
Yeah,
It's like
right.
when Exxon owned where the Toronto Dominion Bank ended up, and left, that Exxon was vacant for probably 20 years, or 10 years anyway. Just what we would think of as a choice lot, and Exxon didn't care at all about it.
Oh, yeah. that-
Just made no difference.
Chabad hasn't come back either. I think they're having, funding problems, but I couldn't say for sure. It could be that they've decided not to do an interim. They want to do the final version of the plan, which is approved and is still there. And then you guys gave it an extension, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Did the tower change ownership, or did they have an internal thing? Because I saw the other day,
New
sign
management.
out under new management.
Under new management, really?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
I
it
did not
said.
see that.
Yeah,
the tower.
yeah. Sign's been up a couple of weeks, right there where they advertised.
So I didn't know whether.
My impression was the owner had some medical issues, but I don't know whether or not.
It said new management,
Under
it
new
didn't say
management.
new
It didn't say
ownership.
It said under new management, so. Whether they're
Check
leasing
and
it
see
out to
who owns the
somebody.
liquor license. That'll tell you whether it changed ownership.
Yeah, we could ask Wayne. Maybe they'll get their menu down to, 20 pages. So,
How about the pile of rubble next to Klein's? What's going on with
Oh,
that?
my gosh, yeah, that, you'll need to ask Steve Klein. He's the one who is in charge of making them do what they're supposed to do, but they really did not follow the rules. And I'm not sure it's their fault, they just didn't realize it, or their contractor didn't realize it, but,
But what you end up with now is the worst thing.
Right.
You know, you have a cease and desist.
them to get rid of it?
well, they had not cut off water, they didn't cut off BGE services, they,
guarantee you, they're not using a whole lot of that service.
no. But I think there's certainly health, safety, welfare issues associated with that when you don't shut down those taps.
Well, and there are when you have demolished property just sitting there for months on end, too.
Yes.
An attractive nuisance.
They need to, you're right, they need to move it along and get rid of it.
Well, I understand that May 3rd is their grand opening for the new ShopRite.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was told that the other day.
That'll be a nice look right next to the,
Yeah, so maybe they'll get rid of that before the grand opening.
yeah. But yeah,
They would be allowed to clean that up even though they have a cease and desist?
they have a stop work. I don't know if, and they're paying a penalty every month for that. So if they, I would assume that, and that's one of the things we're going to have to look at is some of these penalties need to be increased because it's chump change, you know. So that's something that I think is appropriate. I can't tell you what the status of it. That's really under DPW.
Right.
Eddie said Wednesday that all the utilities had been shut off with the exception of they hadn't capped off the sewer yet because the sewer line isn't where it's supposed to be. So they're not sure where it is and then they can't move, it's under a pile of rubble. They can't move the rubble, so they're kind of like a little catch-22.
Catch-22.
But they think they found it, and he said something about April 8th or 9th, they're gonna go back in. Get it cleared out.
How about Hickory Flats? What's going on there?
Hickory Flats, they've done everything they're supposed to do regarding the final site plan, and they just need to pay their fees. And those are substantial. I mean, they're not small. They include impact fees, hookup fees. So it's that's a lot. But I assume they know what they have to do. It's all in their court.
Is there any more on that fence at Upper Chesapeake?
Yes, I talked to the folks at Upper Chesapeake about a week ago, based on Liz and I getting together and getting an understanding of what their limitations are with regard to this condition of approval. And what they're going to do is they're going to revise the letter so that it's more specific, and it's going to propose what they're going to do. So that way you have something to react to. I see this as going from 8 feet down to 4 feet, and that it would be isolated to just the area, just one particular area. And you can either accept that or not. I'm okay with the reduction in height. I think 8 feet was excessive, but the
I'm okay
reduction
with
in
them doing
length.
nothing.
Huh?
Don't just send a letter that they don't want to do it at all.
Well, they could if you guys, I think that getting rid of a condition is hard because you can clarify it. Problem is that they missed the 30-day. And so that means that getting rid of it would be hard to do. I would like to, I don't really want an 8-foot fence running along there. I think that'd be ugly. But that's not my decision, it's yours.
Any other questions?
You have 2 projects coming in next month. One is Hartford Mall. There's a condition of the requirement for them to come in with a revised streetscape all on the southern side of the building. They're going to come in for that. And then you have an accessory dwelling unit use that's being proposed off of Hall Street. Hall and Woodbury, I think.
Accessory dwelling.
accessory dwelling. Basically what used to be called a cottage house in town.
Granny flat.
Granny flat. So,
Not, this isn't under like what we had up on William Street, a separate, smaller house built on the same site.
they're taking what I believe is a garage and they're converting it to an
Converting.
AC, ADU. Yep.
Now,
So
why
that's-
would that come to us and, the William Street went to the Board of Appeals, didn't come here at all?
Changing the code changed all of the R1, R2, R3 to all special developments.
Oh,
No longer are they special exceptions.
okay. Got it.
That actually helps you in things like what's coming from the state, you know, so the more ADUs you have, the, you know, and the rules that you have governing that are very friendly to affordable housing,
Mhm.
so,
Okay,
all right?
is that it?
I have one other question.
One other.
What's the requirement for parking a vehicle in your front yard?
You,
How long can it actually sit in the grass?
it can't,
Okay.
right. So if you see something, or somebody's parking in the grass, report it to us and we'll go see them. Yeah, we had somebody that was parked in the grass in their front yard, and we let him know, gave him a letter, and you probably see it when you drive home. It's on North Main as you're driving out of town, going north. And what they've done is they cut out the grass and they put gravel in. And so they park on the gravel. Yeah, I mean, I was just like, I'm not sure how much better that looks, but it meets the code, so, unfortunately.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right.
There you go.